no matter how much, will ever get to experience your perception, your taste, your experience. So I feel like it's at the highest level, it becomes pointless almost to debate these people.
So what, in your view, what do you think explains all these things like Roswell and these things that these pilots are seeing on their radars and the sightings above these nuclear bases and all this stuff? Like what do you deduce from that?
I don't want to avoid the question, but I'd say, like, why don't you believe in Muhammad? Like, why aren't you a practicing Muslim, Danny? It's not fair, right? I mean, like, maybe you haven't seen evidence to believe. Like, it's not up to you to explain why you're not a practicing Muslim, right? Mm-hmm. It's up to me, if I was proselytizing as a Muslim, to try to convince you that actually Muhammad, the prophet, was this and that, and you should accept him, or Jesus, or whatever, right? In other words, my lack of believing it is not a statement about me, unless you say, like, well, what in other words, how can I explain a billion Muslims worshiping Muhammad, Allah, and being like, okay, this is something that has convinced them. So now you're asking me an analogous thing, like, what explains all these things? Well, I don't believe that they're representative of a reproducible scientific chain of events that can be tested using the scientific method. If in fact it's true, which I don't know, but if it's true that they only reveal themselves to certain people in certain places around nuclear plants, then I have to.
Again, cases of UFOs should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. You can't just lump everything into one huge category and try to, just debunk it all in one big BIM. Everything is different. Every case is different. Every incident is different. We're talking about a advanced intelligent race, apparently, with technology that allows them to disappear, invisibility, possibly teleportation. The government has been researching this. I just don't even know where to begin with Brian, because Brian, I was there when Brian created his channel. I remember when he just had a few stupid videos and he first started that Into the Impossible podcast. I've been there with Brian Keaton since the beginning. I helped him get his first 1,000 subscribers. I interviewed him 2 years ago and helped knock him over the limit. So I've been there from the start with Brian. Thought that he was a friend of mine, help promote his channel. I would send him all kinds of stuff. I send him all kinds of stuff. He doesn't look at any of it. I realized after watching that interview last night that Brian is completely ignorant. He hasn't watched a single thing that I have put together. I have a bachelor's degree in physics. I'm not a total dumbass. Everything I talk about is like either history or documented science. Like I show the papers, I show the documents. I don't just make shit up. So like, it's come as an insult, like a huge insult to me personally. And like, I'm real fucked up over this, man. Like, I helped this dude set up his channel, been sending him information that I thought he was looking at for like the past 2 years. And he hasn't looked at a single bit of it, any of it. He probably hasn't watched a single one of my videos. Like, I have a UAP presentation where I have, 300 slides now? Something like 300 slides. Yeah, 300 some odd slides. One of those slides is Luis Alvarez that I talk about, okay? Luis Alvarez is the only scientist Brian Keaton mentioned or even talked about in his ridiculous podcast. This is just, and it has, I just want to ask everybody, like, we're going to send a message to Brian Keaton that if he doesn't care about this topic, okay, Brian Keaton, I reached out to him last night in a message on Twitter, and he wrote back to me. And this is what he said. The truth is, I am more interested in other topics than UFOs and am doing less of that content going forward. The audience capture is way too powerful. Just look at the vitriolic comments from my appearance with Danny. That's not to do with audience capture. That has to do with your completely complete lack of ignorance and any attention that you've paid to this as a scientist. I've been putting together the most scientific evidence and data of anyone on this topic, and you've just lumped me in with Jeremy Corbell and Jack Sarfartii and all these other guys I mean, you debunked Jack Sarfartii in this thing with one line. You said that his math gives you a headache, and you said that, oh, how can I trust a guy to figure out warp drive who can't even figure out how to use a BCC on an email chain? I mean, this is in the interview. These are Brian Keaton's words, not mine. I'm really like besides myself and with this today, because here I am thinking that this guy's at least paying some kind of attention to the real scientific content. It has nothing to do with, none of my content has anything to do with UFOs, dude. His response to me is that, like, oh, UFOs, I'm staying away from UFOs and not talking about that content anymore. Dude, none of my content really has to do with that. It's all documented, sourced science, all experimental physics. It's all trying to get warp drive, and this guy is just, he's trying to pander to this audience that he thinks cares about his stuff, which, you know, and after I realized that, I've been trying to pander to the scientific audience thinking that they care and watch my stuff, and now I realize that they're completely ignorant and they don't care at all. They don't watch any of my stuff, so I really shouldn't even be trying anymore. This is just, it's an insult to me, Brian. I helped you grow your channel. I helped you get like a lot of your subscribers. I supported you for so long, and you just grouped me in with a whole bunch of, like, I just can't. I interviewed Brian 2 years ago, man, and you know what's crazy? He dipped after only an hour. So we got an hour. We got off to like we got on a pace. We got on some kind of a start, and then as soon as I started getting going with where I wanted to ask him real good questions and stuff, is when he ended the conversation. And I even talked about, like, quantum radar. We spent a big period on quantum radar for about 4 minutes and stuff. And he had no idea about that stuff, and still doesn't talk about it. Like, still doesn't mention any of it in his podcast on UFOs about, like, invisibility and invisible craft and all, you know, a lot of these topics that I tried to, you know, bring up and inject. None of it sank in. You know, the fact that NASA has researched UFOs. The Air Force has researched, you know, teleportation and UFOs. Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, building, you know, UFO technology, based what looks like reverse engineered UFO technology. We have, you know, decades of scientists that have come forward out of these programs saying that they were given stuff. The Battelle Memorial Institute, they manage all of our national laboratories. You can look this up. Brookhaven National Lab, Idaho National Lab, Lawrence Livermore National Labs, Los Alamos National Labs, Oak Ridge National Labs. They're all managed by the same company that's been tied to this freaking damn UFO cover-up for 80 years now or longer. And the mainstream science establishment doesn't care. They don't care. I'm more interested. I'm more interested in building telescopes for all my buddies that are Nobel Prize winners that I'm jealous of, that won because they won the Nobel Prize and I didn't, and I'm butthurt about it. That's like all I get from Brian Keaton, is that he's so hung up on this Nobel Prize and cares so much of the opinions of the academic authority, even though he made a bunch of posts like right before the new year saying, you know, all this crap about, you know, I'm going to piss some people off next year, and I'm going to start, you know, going, you know, like, what I'm going to do with is going to piss a lot of people off in the academic. I thought he was going to, like, you know, start coming out with this stuff. I thought he'd actually been, you know, following up and doing his due diligence as a scientist and you know, following along with all the awesome scientists that we've had present here. You know, Jack Sarfartii is just one of 100 friggin' apex scientists that you can go on and watch these presentations, and all this is backed up with data and hard evidence slides. You know, I don't don't talk to freaking grifters. I don't bring UFO people on my show. I'm trying to get the scientific community to take this seriously, and more scientists to come out of the woodwork and bring us disclosure. And I'm just dumbfounded, man. I really am. I'm so like incredibly angry and frustrated that someone like this essentially used me. They essentially used me as just a YouTuber to get their foot in the to get a channel started. Now he's grown and has more subscribers than me because, you know, he doesn't talk about content that's shadow banned. He doesn't talk about the CIA and the deep state and any of these real subjects that I back up with evidence and hard facts. They're not conspiracy theories. They're actual verifiable intelligence and facts that I mention on this damn show. And none of it has to do with UFOs half the time. It's real technical intelligence. And because this guy's not, he's going to grow bigger than me. He started out smaller than me. I helped him get his first 1,000 subscribers back when I had way more than him. I was stuck at 99,000 for the longest time. And now I'm getting reports from people, man. Like you go to my videos, and I've been getting reports because I've been asking people to look out for it. And a bunch of people get the new, a bunch of new people get these. They subscribe to my channel, and then they're unsubscribed by YouTube. So I'm gonna reach out to YouTube, man, and really like. Today, I'm gonna reach out to YouTube and really try to get to the bottom of this about why my channel is stuck at 115,000 subscribers, why people are not getting notifications for my video, why they're getting unsubscribed from my video, why they're getting sent other places, why we're trying to get real science out to the scientific community about, you know, real top secret black programs and revealing history that's been classified and covered up for decades, and how these mainstream actors and are, you know, essentially acting as propagandists for the whole establishment. The whole scientific establishment is basically a stonewall against real information. Like if anyone discovers anything real, first off, it's getting scooped up by Battelle because they own all our national labs. So anyone who discovers anything remarkable or crazy or that, you know, free energy or anti-gravity, these numbers are getting out to the public. That shit's getting scooped up by a military industrial complex, and it's never going to see the light of day if it exists. I don't think that should exist, because if it did, it would be easier for us to replicate. None of the scientists that I've seen and none of the people in our groups have been able to replicate a lot of that stuff. But man, you could talk, there's lots of old news and old scientists that have plenty of great research that you could talk about. You know, weird, even if it's weird stuff, maybe related some of it's speculation, some of it's absolute fact, like the barium titanate and carbon nanotube skin coatings that the stealth fighters used, that they burned in burn pits, and guys like Fred Dunham breathed in at Area 51 and got sick off of. And we talk about those technologies and the materials and all that stuff, man. But this is great. We're starting a campaign against Dr. Brian Keaton, because seeing as I helped him get probably 2,000 or more subscribers, I'd like to make him feel the heat a little bit on this topic and say, hey, you know what? I hope you guys don't unsubscribe to him permanently, but just unsubscribe to him for a week or two, just to send him and YouTube a message that says, hey, listen, you know, you guys are censoring real science, and you're not looking into real science, and you're just ignoring it. And it's a goddamn insult. It's a goddamn insult to the people who I thought was my friend, help this guy grow his friggin' channel and build an audience. And you know, he doesn't have the time for me. I asked him, oh, hey man, hey, you want to get back on my show and let's do another podcast? And because I wanted to get him on and talk about the real science and stuff. Man, he won't do it. He gave me an hour that one time, and he bailed out after only an hour when I started asking real tough questions. And Danny said he did the same exact thing on his podcast. Look, he bails out after an hour and a half He just ends it right when they start talking about, tic tacs, UFOs, and the analysis. And Danny starts getting into the physics, because Danny knows a little bit. He interviewed me. He's interviewed a few people, and he knows some stuff. But I definitely think I could have asked better questions about the physics and stuff to a physicist like Brian, which is why I think he's told me that he doesn't have time for me or my podcast yet. He has time to fly to New Jersey to go on Julian Dory's podcast. He's got time to fly out to California or Austin, Texas, wherever, and do the so he did Julian Dory's. That he flew to New Jersey. He had time to do that. He's there in person in studio in New Jersey with my boy Julian Dory, right? He had time to go to Joe Rogan podcast and go on Joe Rogan podcast. He had time to, go to Tampa, Florida, to go on Danny Jones' podcast to do this recent podcast. But he doesn't have time for people like me, who helped him grow his channel organically from the beginning, helped him all along the way. I've promoted this dude, and helped him like build his audience and his credibility. And for him to lump me in with a bunch of fucktards and just, unsub from this guy. Thank you. Unsub from him and let him know, let him feel a little bit of that, of the sting of saying, hey, you don't think this topic's worth it for your audience, then I guess we don't either. So this was his response to, I'm going to read the second half. I already read the first half. So the audience capture is way too powerful. Just look at the vitriolic comments from my appearance with Danny. Pathetic, scorned, butthurt little morons seem to be offended by my analysis. So be it. That's what Brian Keaton said to me. He said, these pathetic, scorned, butthurt little morons seem to be offended by my analysis. So be it. But no, I don't think they're offended by your analysis. They're just, so much as the ignorance of your analysis, the complete lack of any understanding that you haven't done a slightest bit of research into this. You haven't watched a single APEC conference. You haven't watched a single alien scientist video. You don't mention a single talking point or fact or piece of evidence from any of the body of literature that we've worked for decades to bring forth to the public. You've completely ignored it. And you've completely pretended it doesn't exist. And you're going off old U.S. Air Force talking points about Luis fucking Alvarez, the balloon scientist, that the mogul balloon train, and you're coming up with these ideas to suggest that that the U.S. military and Navy are setting up a series of these radar reflector balloons so that they can trap F-18s in them and get them to crash or something. It just, all his explanations are absurd. To the fact that he asked him about the tic tac, and he started going off on a tirade about Venus and how UFO sightings go up when Venus is in the air. It's just, he's got some good interviews. I'd say a few of them, man. But I just, it's just ridiculous, man. He hasn't looked into any of the information, man. He this is cool. I know that a lot of these UFO crashes happen around top secret military installations. I'm not sold that Roswell was aliens, man. It could have been a top secret project, but I don't think it was a weather balloon. I think it was something else to do with that secret space program that existed from 1945, when we brought 1,600 Nazi German scientists over with Operation Paperclip and kept them in secret space programs until 1958, when they finally created NASA. And we had a public space program that was no longer secret. And even though NASA did a lot of secret things like study UFOs and have physicists study their propulsion mechanisms and stuff, that's all real. And so is, fractal crystals, metamaterials, sonic metamaterials or acoustic metamaterials. So are stealth tanks that BAE are inventing from polychromatic panelings that can turn invisible. And just imagine next tons of generations up for that, what light bending capabilities aliens might have. Talk about the secret anti-gravity conference that happened with Richard Feynman, believe it or not. you know, one of Brian Keaton and many physicists' heroes. You know, John Archibald Wheeler was there too. Wheeler took part in a lot of the top secret research for all this stuff. He was connected with Battelle. He was an expert metallurgist. He did metals analysis. So when Brian Keaton makes that point, you know, what do you think? Would you rather have is the physics and the math, or would you rather have or do you think it's metallurgy? You know, he asks Danny, you know, do you think it's metallurgy or like theoretical physics that gets him here or something? And Danny says, I don't know, metallurgy. It sounds more practical, right? It sounds more practical about for the science. And yeah, I would agree. The metals are super key to a lot of this stuff. I believe you take metals, you etch them, you can create hologram, you can create holographics, patterning things that can